Hey, good morning. Welcome to today's daily devotional. Thank you for joining with me today. We are in chapter 25 of the Gospel of Matthew, and what we have been looking at in chapters 24 and 25 have been the Jesus talking about the end times. What is the sign of your return? What are the things that are going to happen before you return? Jesus is talking about in giving the flow of history until he returns. And so we've seen that in chapters 24 and 25. He ends all of that discussion in 24 and in the first parts of 25, really with giving some parables that illustrate that we need to make sure that we are ready. We looked yesterday at a parable at the beginning of Matthew 25. We looked at the parable of what was called the 10 virgins, or the 10 brides in waiting, or the 10 women who are part of a wedding party. We saw that example. The whole illustration that Jesus is giving from that example is to make sure that you are ready. Do not be unprepared. Do not be taking for granted the fact that the Lord is going to return, that the bridegroom will come for the bride. Don't be caught off guard. Make sure that your heart is ready, your life is ready for Jesus to return. That becomes the question that parable really related to, and the question was, what is readiness? Well, Jesus is going to go on and tell another parable now, and this parable really is about readiness. It's about the answer to that question. What does it mean then to be ready? Well, Jesus is going to speak of that with the parable of the 10 talents. And so this is um, the parable number 3 that he is telling, and this is the parable that is the instruction, how to be ready, how to be prepared. Let's dig into this. We're going to start in chapter 25 in verse 14, and the plan is to get through verse 30 today. All of that is talking about this parable, the parable of the talents, which is the parable of instruction. So let's look at this together. Jesus says this, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey." So let's stop right there and let's look at this parable together. There's a man that is traveling to a far country. He called his servants together and he delivered his goods to them. This is not a strange idea in the ancient world. When you would go on a trip or go to a far country in the ancient world, it would take months. You would be gone for months. And so it was not a strange idea to call the servants together. The servants worked for the master. They were, in many ways, they were indebted to the master. They were servants of his, and they would often be given in that culture a great responsibility. This was often the safest and smartest thing that a person could do with his money. If you knew that you were going to be gone for a while, you found the servants that you really trusted the most. You gave these servants your money to work with, and you trusted that they were going to do right by you by the time you returned. F. Bruce, the Bible commentator, said this. He said the best thing he could do with his money in his absence, dividing it among carefully selected servants and leaving them to do their best with it. This is taking up the question that was left off with the bridesmaids, and that was that question that was unanswered. Again, what is readiness? Well, here's readiness. He's going to entrust his servants with these talents. Now, here's what it says. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1. A talent, even though we think of that as an ability, although you can imply that application through this parable, that it can be an ability, but in this particular case, a talent was a unit of money. That unit of money was at least worth about, you could say, maybe roughly $1,200 in modern terms, likely a lot more than that. That's a very low estimate. So every talent was worth, let's estimate, somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000. So to one, you could say he gave maybe $10,000, to another $4,000, to another a couple $1,000s. That's the picture of what's going on. William Barclay said this. He said the talent was not a coin, it was a weight. And therefore, its value obviously depended on whatever the coinage was that was involved. So if you were weighing copper or gold or silver, that would give you the value of what a talent was actually worth. In the Greek language, the word is talenton, and it's simply a sum of money. It was generally regarded as somewhere equal to about 6,000 denarii. If a talent were worth about 6,000 denarii, it would take a day laborer in that day of an age about 20 years to earn that much money. So these servants were being trusted with a tremendous amount of money. It would take them, 20 years to earn that amount of money, a lot of time working. Now, we can imply in this parable the application of the talents as synonymous with life resources, such as time or money or abilities and authority. Those are the pictures of what a talent could possibly be, how it could be used in that regard. But it was simply a form of money. It was a weight of money. It was a large sum of money. Now, Jesus is using this illustration, and he says that this master, this person who was traveling to a far country, gave to each one of his servants what was uh, to each according to his own ability. The servants were all given different amounts of money according to their abilities. One servant received 1 talent. That's not an insignificant amount. It's a very large amount. Some receive more than that, but everyone received something, and everyone received something that was related to their own talents and their own abilities that they had. So that's the picture, that's the scene that is going on. So now the servants are going to manage the master's money. Let's look at this. Then he who had received, the servant who had received the 5 talents, went and traded with them, and he made another 5 talents. So let's assume that the guy took about $10,000 and he doubled his money. Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't you love to be able to do that? Maybe some of you have that ability, but the ability to just double the money. And so he made another 5 talents. Likewise, the one who'd received 2 gained another 2. So he doubled his money. Incredible, 100% return on both of those investments. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. So they went and traded. That's the picture that implies a direct action. To go and trade means that they took what was given to them and they did something with it. The point is that the good servants felt the responsibility and the assignment, and they went to work without delay. They went after it. They did what they were entrusted to do. They were responsible. They were the reason that they were good servants is because they were responsible and they handled correctly what was given to them. We aren't told how they traded with their talents. Maybe they loaned their money at interest. Maybe they used the money. They bought things. Maybe they flipped some things. I don't know. Maybe they bought things. They sold them for more money. The point is they used what they had and they gained more by using what they had. We could say incredible things about the work of these first 2 servants. They did their work promptly. They did their work with perseverance. They did their work with success, and they were ready to give an account to their master when their master returned. But the 3rd servant, he did nothing with the money. He took some care that it would not be lost by hiding it, but he did nothing positive with his master's money, in contrast to what the first 2 servants did. Let's go on with the rest of the story. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have doubled your money. I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. So in other words, you're getting a promotion. You are getting that corner office. You are getting this incredible kingdom that I'm going to let you rule over. You proved yourself faithful. I am going to bless you because you have proved through character that you are trustworthy, that you are willing to persevere, that you are willing to work hard, that you're willing to use what I have given you. Enter into the joy of your Lord. That's one statement that is made. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents beside them. His Lord just said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have you have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Again, it's the same concept. You have done well. You used good character. You were persevering. You worked hard. You used what I gave you. You really went after it. Enter into the joy of your Lord. I'm going to set you up, and you're going to rule over this kingdom. You're going to have things that you're going to be in charge of because you are so faithful. That picture is incredible to see. His Lord who blessed him immensely. It took a while for the master to come back, because it says, even the previous slide, after a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts. There was a long wait. That long delay could have tempted the servants to think that their master would never come. They would never have to give an account. Maybe it could tempt them to do something evil with what was given to them. But they were faithful. They were faithful, and the Lord blessed it. The Lord blessed the fact that they were faithful and they used good character. The reward of these first two servants, I just noticed this. They received praise from their master. They received a promise of a future blessing from their master, and they received glory. They entered into the joy of the Lord. Now, the third servant has a different account. Let's look at what his story is. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. So I want you to notice here, the one who'd received the 1 talent, if the master judged each of the servants as a group, they did incredibly well. They had been given 8 talents, they had returned 15 talents. But that's not how the master judged them. He judged them individually on their individual character, faithfulness, and effort. God is going to do the same thing. You will not be judged based upon what your family did. You will not be judged based upon what your parents believed. You'll not be judged based upon what your friends believe, what your coworkers believe, what other people said. Each one of us will have to individually and personally give an account to the master as to what we did with what God left us. This man did nothing. He took what was given to him, he buried it in the sand, and he returned it back to him when his master arrived. Why did he do this? Well, here's what he says. He says, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, gathering where you have not scattered seed, and I was afraid. I knew you to be a hard man. The word hard means grasping, ungenerous, selfish, taking all to himself, giving nothing back to his servants, not blessing anyone, but just being wicked and taking everything upon himself. That's what he believed his master to be. But we know that that's not true, because his master at the very beginning trusted them. At the very beginning, his master gave him his talents, the things that really, the value and the money that he had. He gave that to these servants. He trusted them. He hoped and believed in them. And when the other two came through, he blessed and rewarded them. This man, the third man, thinks that the master is a hard man, and I'm afraid of him. It's because he didn't know him. It's because he didn't have any direct relationship with him. He didn't understand how generous and how great and how much this master would actually bless his servants who actually showed quality character. It's the way that many people approach God. They assume things about God. They don't like things about God. They don't like the judgments that they hear about God. They don't like God's standards. They don't like God's moral values. And as such, instead of getting to know God, they just say, you're a hard man. I don't want to follow you. I don't want to obey you. I don't want to do what you say. Charles Spurgeon said this, remember, my hearer, that in the day of judgment, your account must be personal. God will not ask you what your church did. He will ask you what you did yourself. This man assumed that the master was just a hard man and he was afraid of him, so he took what was given to him and just buried it in the ground. We can say of the work of the third servant, in contrast to the first two servants, that he didn't think, he didn't work, he didn't even try. Instead, he just made excuses. In fact, the excuse that he made was not taking personal responsibility, but blaming the master himself. See, it's not my fault that I didn't do anything with it. It's really your fault that I didn't do anything with it because you're a hard man and I'm afraid of you. No, that's not really the case. The case is you were lazy, you didn't do anything, you didn't think, you didn't work, you didn't even try. All you did was make excuses. It's not his fault, it's your fault. When we stand before God, it's not going to be God's fault. It's not going to be anybody else's fault. It's going to be my fault if I don't make sure that I know him and have a personal relationship with him. Well, the response of all of this is our final thing that we want to look at, and that is the fact that the third servant is judged. Let's look at this together. But the master, his lord, answered this third servant and said to him, "You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed, so you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers. And at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore, take the talent from him, give it to the one who has 10 talents, because I can truly trust him. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast that third servant, that wicked servant, that unprofitable servant, into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." The master says this, "You wicked and lazy servant." That is a condemnation. It is a severe condemnation. It is a strong condemnation. The master did not excuse the laziness of the servant. He condemned the laziness of the servant. Those who don't work for the Lord or pray or don't evangelize because of whatever reason, because of laziness, they just need to know that God will bring condemnation against that. By their actions or their lack of action, they show that their heart is not really his. They don't know the master's heart at all. He didn't know the master's heart at all. And the response was a condemnation from the master. God is that master. The Lord is the one who has entrusted us with talent. He's entrusted us with money. How we handle our money is a direct relation to him. Do you use your money to bless others? Do you give? And I'm not just talking about tithing, giving to the church. Do you give to ministries that are preaching the gospel? Do you give to people that are in need and really need help? You're using your talents for God's sake instead of for selfish endeavors. But think about your talents beyond just the money aspect. You have talents, gifts, abilities that God has given you and he's entrusted you with. What are you doing with those things? How are you using them? Are you sharing the gospel? Are you teaching the gospel? Are you preaching the gospel? Are you evangelizing the lost? Are you reaching out to people who are broken and hurting? Are you using the talents that God has given you for his glory, or are you like that wicked servant just burying those talents in the sand? God expects us to use what he has given us to bless others until the day that he returns. God is going to come back. Jesus will return, and we will have to give an account to him on how we have used what he has entrusted us with. And I hope that you are using what he has entrusted you with to make a difference for his kingdom. If not, I don't want to see people be like that third servant, that wicked servant who was entrusted with so much, who did nothing, because in the end, the consequences was extreme punishment. Cast this one out into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You ever think about the picture of what hell is? Hell is that picture of outer darkness. Can you imagine what it would be like to be in a position of outer darkness where everyone is weeping and grinding and gnashing their teeth, where the stress never leaves, where the suffering never ends, where the pain is never handled? That picture of hell is given by Jesus in another account. He calls it the Valley of Gehenna. The Valley of Gehenna, that place where they would be thrown into, that hell, that place that was the eternal fire. And the reason we get that picture of eternal fire is because it was the city garbage heap. They would take all of the garbage along with dead carcasses of animals, the sacrificial animals that maybe were going to be thrown there, or animals that had died in the city, even dead bodies. All of that would be thrown into that Valley of Gehenna. In that Valley of Gehenna, they would have eternal fires going because garbage was always being burnt. Worms were always working their way through all of the garbage and all of the refuse because that's what worms do. And that's why Jesus says, where the fire never dies, where the worm never ceases, all of that happens in the Valley of Gehenna. That's the picture of hell. Outer darkness is another picture of hell. When we are wicked, hearts that are hardened toward God, hearts that have removed ourselves from God, hearts that are disobedient toward God, rejecting of God, the ultimate end punishment is to be tossed into the outer darkness. Some think that Jesus' return is just an abstract thing, that it isn't real and it isn't going to happen. It's not a matter of what you think, it's a matter of what Jesus says. And in light of this parable, in light of the past two parables, we have to know that Jesus will return. And when he returns, are we going to be ready? What are we doing with our knowledge, with our time, with our money, with our abilities? Are we using it to further God's kingdom and to make a difference for him? Keep working, keep trusting, keep pressing on until Jesus returns. And when he returns, like those first two servants, he will look at you and say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the Lord's rest. Enter into the joy of the Lord." Well, I hope you got something out of today, and I hope it was helpful. Join me back here tomorrow as we get into the end of chapter 25. We're almost at the end of the book of Matthew. We're going to be in chapter 25, starting in verse 31 tomorrow, when Jesus is going to talk about the judgment of the nations. Join me back here then. God bless you. Have a great day. We'll see you then.